You expect me to believe you are a general? Officer Dean Whitaker held the military identification between two fingers as if the card itself had offended him. Brigadier General Alicia Monroe stood beneath the pale afternoon light outside a military hotel near Arlington, Virginia, wearing a navy blazer, cream blouse, tailored black slacks, and low professional shoes. No uniform, no ribbons, no stars on her shoulders. Nothing about her appearance gave Whitaker the visual answer he wanted. Alicia looked at the identification in his hand, then back at him. Call the liaison. Her voice was steady. That seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. 30 minutes earlier, Alicia had left a secure defense meeting and was preparing to travel to a second briefing closer to the Pentagon. She had parked in a restricted military access section using credentials issued through her assignment, carried a leather briefcase containing sealed meeting materials, and stopped briefly inside the hotel lobby to speak with an aide. A hotel employee unfamiliar with her had noticed the parking credential and called local police, reporting a woman who might be using military access without authorization. The complaint had been vague. Whitaker had made it specific. What unit, he asked. United States Army. I asked what unit. Alicia gave him the command information necessary for verification. Officer Kyle Mason, Whitaker's younger partner, stood several feet away near the patrol vehicle, listening carefully. Whitaker examined the identification again. Brigadier General Alicia Monroe. He almost smiled. That is a big title. Alicia said nothing. Where is your uniform? I am not required to travel in uniform for this meeting. Convenient. Kyle shifted his weight. Dean, we can verify the card. Whitaker ignored him. How long have you been a general? Alicia answered. He asked where she had served. She answered only what was appropriate. He asked which command had promoted her. She gave a concise response. Then he asked about deployment history. Alicia's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Recognition. The questions were no longer about the parking credential. Officer Whitaker, none of that is necessary to verify my identity. His eyebrows lifted. So now you do not want to answer? I have answered what is relevant. That sounds like somebody trying to keep a story straight. Kyle looked toward him. Dean. Whitaker held up one hand. I have this. Alicia watched the hotel entrance behind him. A few guests had begun to notice. One man slowed near the revolving door. A woman holding a coffee cup looked from Alicia to the officers, then quickly away. Humiliation could be quiet. It did not need shouting. Sometimes it was simply being forced to explain your own existence while strangers decided whether you looked believable enough. Whitaker handed the card back, but his expression remained skeptical. I have seen fake military credentials before. Alicia slid the card into her wallet. Then verification should settle it. Kyle nodded. I can call the military liaison through dispatch. Whitaker looked at him. Not yet. Alicia's eyes narrowed. Why not? Whitaker stepped back and crossed his arms. Because real generals do not usually stand around arguing about whether they are real generals. Alicia absorbed the insult without giving him the reaction he seemed to expect. I am not arguing about my rank. She paused. You are. Her secure phone vibrated inside the leather briefcase. Once. Then again. Major Sarah Caldwell was expecting her at the next briefing. Alicia knew the first missed check-in would already be noticed. Whitaker heard the vibration and glanced toward the case. What is in there? Official meeting materials. Open it. Alicia remained still. For what purpose? His face hardened. You are making this worse. Kyle spoke more firmly this time. Dean, let me verify her credentials. Whitaker did not look at him. His attention stayed on Alicia. Until I know otherwise, I think we may be dealing with military fraud. The words hung between them. Alicia felt every pair of eyes near the lobby turn heavier. She could have ended the argument by saying more. She could have named people Whitaker would recognize. She could have used the authority he refused to believe she possessed. Instead, she chose the simplest path. Call the liaison. Whitaker gave a short laugh. Alicia looked toward the red light on his body camera. Then she looked back at him. And keep that recording running. Officer Kyle Mason kept his eyes on Alicia Monroe while Dean Whitaker stood between her and the hotel entrance, still treating a verified identity as if it were only another claim. The afternoon traffic along the Arlington road moved steadily behind them, ordinary and indifferent, while Alicia remained beside the curb with her leather briefcase at her feet and her secure phone vibrating again inside it. Whitaker glanced toward the sound. You keep getting calls. Alicia answered calmly. I am expected somewhere. Where? A Department of Defense briefing. Whitaker gave a faint smile that carried more disbelief than amusement. Of course you are. Kyle looked at him. Dean, this is getting unnecessary. Let me run the military identification. Whitaker turned. And if it comes back fake? Then we deal with that. Exactly. So we are not done. Alicia watched the exchange without interrupting. She had spent years in rooms where rank mattered, where decisions affected thousands of people, where discipline meant knowing when to speak and when silence carried more weight. Here, silence was being interpreted as secrecy. Calm was being interpreted as performance. Whitaker faced her again. Open the briefcase. Alicia did not move. You still have not explained why. Because you say it contains official military material. That does not give you permission to inspect it. His jaw tightened. You are very comfortable telling police officers what they can and cannot do. Alicia looked directly at him. I am comfortable asking for the reason. Kyle lowered his gaze for a moment. Whitaker exhaled sharply. There. That attitude again. Alicia's face remained unreadable. You called me a fraud before verifying anything. I said we may be dealing with fraud. Based on what? Whitaker looked toward the restricted parking area. You were using military access credentials while dressed like a civilian. Alicia paused. That is your evidence. He ignored the question. Kyle stepped closer to the patrol vehicle and keyed the radio. Dispatch, can you connect me with the regional military liaison for credential verification? Whitaker looked over immediately. Kyle, we need to settle this. I told you not yet. Kyle hesitated, then kept the radio in his hand. Alicia noticed the hesitation more than the action. A younger officer recognizing the right procedure was not the same as having the courage to insist on it. Her phone vibrated for the fourth time. This time Whitaker pointed toward the briefcase. Answer it. Alicia looked at him. Am I being detained? The question stopped him for half a second. You are not free to leave until I finish this investigation. Then I want the basis for the detention stated clearly. Whitaker's expression hardened. Possible military impersonation and misuse of restricted access. Kyle looked at him. Dispatch never said impersonation. Whitaker turned sharply. The hotel employee reported suspicious military credentials. Kyle shook his head. The original call said possible unauthorized parking access. That is not the same thing. Silence settled between them. Alicia looked from Kyle to Whitaker. The distinction mattered. The accusation that had humiliated her had not come from the hotel. It had come from Whitaker. Officer Mason, she said, please continue the verification request. Whitaker stepped toward the patrol car. No, we are taking this to the station. Kyle stared at him. For what? Until we confirm who she is. Alicia's expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Disappointment. You have a verification channel available right now. Whitaker answered. And I am choosing to handle this my way. Alicia bent slowly, picked up her briefcase, and held it close to her side. Then preserved the dispatch audio. Whitaker frowned. What? And both body camera recordings. Kyle looked at her. Alicia continued, each word controlled. Preserve the original complaint exactly as it was received. Whitaker gave another short laugh. You really think someone at the Pentagon is going to come rescue you? Alicia said nothing. Across town, Major Sarah Caldwell was already staring at an empty chair in a secure briefing room. Alicia Monroe was 14 minutes late. That had never happened before. Sarah checked the encrypted message system, saw no update, and reached for the secure telephone. Back outside the hotel, Whitaker opened the rear door of the patrol vehicle and gestured toward it. Alicia stepped forward without argument. Kyle watched her, then looked again at the radio in his hand. He knew the liaison call would have taken minutes. Whitaker had chosen not to make it. Alicia paused before getting inside and looked at him. Officer Mason, remember that. The ride to the precinct took 11 minutes, and Alicia Monroe spent every one of them watching how quickly suspicion became language. Dean Whitaker sat in the front passenger seat while Kyle Mason drove, the patrol radio murmuring beneath the sound of traffic. Alicia sat in the rear with her leather briefcase beside her and her secure phone still vibrating at irregular intervals. Whitaker spoke into the radio first. Adult female being transported for possible military impersonation and unauthorized use of restricted access credentials. Kyle's eyes flicked toward him. Alicia noticed. Officer Whitaker, she said, the original complaint did not mention military impersonation. Whitaker turned halfway toward the partition. You do not get to dictate how I describe the investigation. I am not dictating anything. I am asking that you distinguish what was reported from what you concluded. Kyle kept both hands on the wheel. Whitaker looked forward again. There you go. Always correcting somebody. Alicia leaned back. She had commanded officers in environments where mistakes could not be protected by ego. The first responsibility after uncertainty was verification. The second was accuracy. Whitaker seemed determined to avoid both. Kyle finally spoke. Dean, she is right about the original call. Whitaker exhaled. Kyle, stop undermining me in front of a detainee. I am talking about the dispatch record. Same difference. Alicia said quietly, no, it is not. Whitaker turned again. You really cannot help yourself, can you? Alicia held his gaze. Accuracy is not disrespect. Silence filled the vehicle for several seconds. Then Alicia's secure phone vibrated again. Kyle glanced into the rearview mirror. How late are you? 22 minutes. Whitaker gave a dismissive laugh. For your Pentagon meeting? For a Department of Defense briefing. Right. Alicia did not answer. She did not need to. Across the Potomac, Major Sarah Caldwell had already contacted the security coordinator assigned to the briefing and confirmed that Alicia had never arrived. Her secure messages had gone unanswered. The last known location placed her near the Arlington Hotel. Sarah escalated the matter through the established command contact, not because Alicia was important enough to deserve special rescue, but because a senior officer assigned to a sensitive interagency meeting had vanished from schedule without explanation. At the precinct, Captain Rebecca Collins was reviewing afternoon incident reports when her desk telephone rang. The caller identified himself as Colonel James Foster, Department of Defense Military Liaison. Captain Collins, I am trying to locate Brigadier General Alicia Monroe. Collins straightened in her chair. Who? Brigadier General Alicia Monroe, United States Army. We have reason to believe local officers made contact with her near a military lodging facility. Collins looked toward the intake desk. I have not been briefed on that. Foster's tone remained controlled. Then please check your incoming units. She missed a secure briefing and is not answering her government phone. Collins reached for the station radio log. At that exact moment, Kyle turned the patrol vehicle into the parking lot. Whitaker looked toward the building with the confidence of someone expecting the station to validate his decision. Alicia looked through the window and saw a woman step quickly from the front entrance. Captain Collins. She was already holding a telephone. Kyle parked. Whitaker opened his door first. We will sort this out inside. Alicia picked up her briefcase. You could have sorted it out at the hotel. Whitaker ignored her. Collins approached before they reached the entrance. Officer Whitaker. He stopped. Captain. Who is she? Whitaker gestured toward Alicia. Possible military impersonation. Claims she is a brigadier general. Collins looked at Alicia, then at the telephone still in her hand. Claims. Kyle stepped forward. She presented military identification. I asked to verify it. Collins turned to Whitaker. Did you? Whitaker hesitated. Not yet. The expression on Collins's face changed. You transported her without verification? Captain, there were inconsistencies. Alicia spoke for the first time. There were questions, not inconsistencies. Collins looked at her. Ma'am, your name? Alicia Monroe. Collins slowly lifted the telephone. Colonel Foster, are you still there? A voice answered faintly through the receiver. Collins did not take her eyes off Alicia. I believe she just arrived. Whitaker frowned. Who is that? Collins covered the receiver. Department of Defense Liaison. The parking lot seemed to go still. Kyle looked down. Whitaker looked at Alicia. Alicia remained exactly as she had been outside the hotel. Calm, controlled, unimpressed. Collins returned to the call, listened for several seconds, then said, Understood, Colonel. When she lowered the receiver, her voice was quiet. Officer Whitaker, Brigadier General Monroe's identity has just been confirmed through her command liaison. No one spoke. Alicia looked at Whitaker and said, You had the same option 20 minutes ago. Captain Rebecca Collins ended the call with Colonel James Foster and stood for a moment in the precinct parking lot, looking from Alicia Monroe to Dean Whitaker as if the entire situation had rearranged itself in front of her. Kyle Mason remained near the patrol vehicle, visibly uneasy. The verification had taken less than a minute once someone finally made the call. That fact seemed heavier than any accusation. Collins turned to Alicia first. General Monroe, are you being held for any other reason? Alicia looked at Whitaker. That depends on Officer Whitaker. Collins followed her gaze. Officer. Whitaker straightened. Captain, the hotel reported suspicious use of military access. She was evasive about her background and refused to open the briefcase. Alicia did not react. Collins did. Did the hotel report military impersonation? Whitaker hesitated. Not in those exact words. Did the hotel report a stolen credential? No. Did anyone verify whether the parking credential was valid before transport? Kyle answered quietly. No, Captain. Whitaker looked toward him, but Kyle kept going. I offered to contact the liaison twice. Collins' eyes moved back to Whitaker. Twice. Yes. Alicia stood beside them with the same controlled posture she had maintained outside the hotel. The humiliation had not disappeared simply because her rank was now confirmed. A title could correct a record. It could not erase the way she had been looked at while strangers watched. Collins gestured toward the station entrance. Everyone inside. We are documenting this from the beginning. Whitaker frowned. Captain, this is becoming bigger than it needs to be. Collins stopped. It became bigger when verification was available and not used. Inside the precinct, Alicia was offered a conference room instead of the intake desk. She declined coffee and placed her leather briefcase on the table without opening it. Collins sat across from her while Kyle and Whitaker remained nearby. General, I need your account. Alicia looked toward the body cameras. Before I give one, I want confirmation that both recordings, the patrol vehicle audio, and the original dispatch call are preserved. Collins nodded. They will be. Whitaker folded his arms. You are acting like someone altered something already. Alicia looked at him. Preservation is not an accusation. It is what prevents one. Collins requested the dispatch audio. A few minutes later, the original hotel call played through a desk speaker. The employee's voice was cautious, uncertain. A woman had parked in a restricted military section. The employee did not recognize her. The caller wondered whether the access credential was authorized. That was all. No accusation of impersonating a general. No allegation of fake military identification. No claim of fraud. Collins stopped the recording. Officer Whitaker, when did military fraud enter this incident? Whitaker shifted. When she claimed to be a brigadier general. Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly. I did not volunteer my rank. You read it from my identification. Kyle looked at Collins. That is correct. Whitaker exhaled. The whole thing did not feel right. Collins leaned back. What specifically did not feel right? He answered too quickly. Her answers. Alicia spoke. Which one? Whitaker looked at her. She continued. My name was correct. My identification was valid. My command information was verifiable. My parking credential was issued through the assignment. Which answer created probable cause for fraud? Collins raised one hand gently before the exchange could sharpen. We are staying with facts. Alicia nodded. That is exactly what I am doing. Collins asked Kyle to recount the roadside interaction. His voice was hesitant at first, then steadier. He confirmed Alicia had cooperated. He confirmed she had repeatedly requested verification. He confirmed Whitaker refused the liaison call and chose transport instead. Whitaker finally interrupted. She was controlling the encounter. Alicia turned toward him. I was asking you to use the system designed to answer your question. Collins looked at Whitaker for several seconds, then reached for her telephone. I am notifying internal affairs and placing the incident under administrative review. Whitaker stared at her. Because the Pentagon called? Collins shook her head. Because the call showed us how easily this could have been resolved. Alicia looked down at the closed briefcase. Inside were sealed materials from the meeting she had missed, but she still had no intention of using them as proof of importance. Her rank had already been confirmed. The deeper question remained untouched. She looked at Collins. Captain, do not investigate this because I am a general. Collins met her eyes. Alicia continued. Investigate whether he would have doubted me this long if I had been someone he expected to believe. Internal affairs arrived before sunset, not with accusations, but with questions that demanded timestamps. Investigator Marcus Hill took the conference room across from Captain Rebecca Collins and began by reviewing the original dispatch call, the patrol vehicle audio, and both body camera recordings in order. Alicia Monroe sat at the far end of the table with her leather briefcase closed beside her. Dean Whitaker remained standing near the wall, arms crossed, while Kyle Mason sat several feet away and watched the screen. Hill started the video from the hotel. Alicia appeared in civilian clothes, holding her identification out calmly. Whitaker's recorded voice questioned her rank. Kyle suggested verification. Alicia asked for the liaison. Whitaker declined. Hill paused the footage. Officer Whitaker, what prevented verification at this point? Whitaker looked at the screen. I was still assessing whether the credentials were legitimate. Hill nodded. That is exactly what verification would determine. Whitaker said nothing. The recording continued. Alicia answered questions about her command. Whitaker asked about deployment history. Hill stopped the video again. How was that relevant to the parking credential? Whitaker shifted. People impersonating service members memorize basic information. Alicia did not react. Hill looked at her. General Monroe, did you refuse to identify yourself? No. Did you refuse to provide command information necessary for verification? No. Did you attempt to leave? No. Hill looked toward Kyle. Officer Mason? Kyle shook his head. She stayed where we asked her to stay. The next segment played. Whitaker called the situation possible military fraud. Then came Alicia's question about what the hotel had actually reported. Hill opened the dispatch transcript on his laptop. The caller reported possible unauthorized parking access. Nothing about military impersonation. Collins leaned forward slightly. Whitaker answered. The impersonation concern developed during contact. Hill looked at him. Based on what specific fact? Whitaker's expression tightened. The claim of being a brigadier general did not seem credible. The room became very still. Alicia looked at him for the first time since the video began. Hill did not rush. Why? Whitaker hesitated. It was the totality. Name one fact from that totality. Whitaker looked toward the monitor. She was not in uniform. Hill wrote something down. Anything else? She was defensive. Kyle glanced at Alicia, then back at Hill. She was not defensive. Whitaker turned toward him. Kyle. Mason continued. She kept asking us to verify. That is what happened. Hill replayed the moment when Alicia said, call the liaison. Her voice was controlled. No raised tone. No refusal. No attempt to walk away. Hill let the silence following the clip remain untouched. Then he opened the patrol audio. Whitaker's radio transmission described possible military impersonation as though it had been part of the original complaint. Collins' expression changed. That wording was not in dispatch. I was summarizing my assessment, Whitaker said. Hill looked at him. The distinction matters because your assessment became the official reason for transport. Alicia spoke quietly. Suspicion became record before verification became evidence. Hill nodded once. That is what we are examining. He then asked record staff for a limited sample of Whitaker's prior encounters involving military identification, disputed credentials, or citizens described as deceptive after requesting verification. Whitaker gave a short laugh. So now we are digging through years of work because she outranks everyone in this building? Alicia turned toward him. My rank did not create your recording. Hill ignored the remark and opened the first prior complaint. It involved a Black Army veteran named Terrence Cole, stopped 18 months earlier after a database returned an outdated address. Cole had presented a military retiree card and asked whether Whitaker could confirm his status through an official channel. The written report described him as evasive about service history. The body camera showed Cole answering basic identification questions and declining to discuss details of past deployments. Hill paused the footage. Was his identity eventually confirmed? A records clerk answered from the doorway. Yes. 26 minutes later. Through what method? A supervisor called the appropriate verification contact. Hill looked at Whitaker. So the same solution was available then too. Whitaker's face hardened. These situations are not identical. Alicia spoke before anyone else could. They do not have to be identical to deserve comparison. Hill opened a second file, then a third. Different people, different days, similar language. Collins looked at the growing list and reached for a legal pad. The investigation had shifted. It was no longer asking whether Dean Whitaker had made one poor decision outside a hotel. It was asking whether he had learned to treat certain people as suspicious first and verifiable second. By the next morning, investigator Marcus Hill had reviewed enough prior encounters to know the department could no longer treat Dean Whitaker's decisions as a single moment of poor judgment. He was careful not to call it a pattern before the evidence justified the word. Instead, he built timelines. One involved Terrence Cole, the Black Army veteran whose military status had been doubted for 26 minutes before a supervisor verified it through the same kind of official contact Alicia Monroe had requested. Another involved a black logistics contractor named Denise Warren, whose valid government credentials had been described in Whitaker's report as possibly fabricated after she declined to discuss restricted details about her assignment. A third involved a black reservist named Marcus Green, stopped near a training facility after displaying an access permit that Whitaker said did not look right. Each case had differences. Hill wrote those down too. But each also contained the same uncomfortable sequence. Valid information appeared. Whitaker remained skeptical. The citizen asked for formal verification, and the encounter continued longer than the original concern seemed to require. Captain Rebecca Collins stood beside Hill's desk as he opened the department's audit system. How many of these were complaints? She asked. 3 formal complaints. 2 supervisor notes. 1 counseling entry. Findings. Mostly closed as officer discretion or caution. Collins folded her arms. Were the recordings reviewed? Hill looked at the files. Some were. Not always against the exact wording of the reports. Across the hall, Kyle Mason was giving a supplemental statement. He had slept badly. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Alicia telling him to remember that the liaison call had been available. When Hill brought him back into the conference room, Kyle looked at the screen showing Whitaker questioning Terrence Cole. Have you seen Officer Whitaker handle military credentials this way before? Hill asked. Kyle hesitated. Not exactly. That is not what I asked. Kyle took a breath. I have seen him assume people were exaggerating who they were. What kind of people? Kyle stared at the table. People he thought did not fit the story they were telling. Collins leaned forward. Explain that. Kyle rubbed his palms together. Someone says they are an officer, a contractor, a veteran, someone with a high-level job. Dean starts testing them instead of verifying them. Testing how? Asking questions he thinks a real person in that role should know. Hill glanced at Collins. Like deployment history. Kyle nodded. Yes. And if they refuse? He takes the refusal as suspicious. The room stayed quiet. Alicia arrived shortly before noon to complete a formal statement. She had changed into her Army uniform after the briefing she missed was rescheduled, and the single star on each shoulder made Whitaker's earlier disbelief impossible to ignore. Yet when she entered the conference room, she removed her cap, placed it on the table, and spoke without ceremony. Do not let the uniform become evidence of whether I deserved fair treatment. Hill nodded. It will not. He explained what the review had uncovered so far. Alicia listened carefully. When he finished, she asked, Are you comparing these stops with similar encounters involving white service members? Hill looked up. We were going to expand the sample. Do that before you conclude anything. Collins studied her. You are asking us to look for evidence that might weaken your own concern. Alicia's expression remained steady. I am asking you to look for the truth. Hill sat back. That answer changed the direction of the review. They pulled comparable encounters involving white veterans, reservists, contractors, and officers whose credentials had initially raised questions. The difference was not absolute, but it was noticeable. Verification tended to happen sooner. Questions about service history were shorter. Reports used words like confusion or credential issue, instead of deceptive or evasive. Whitaker, through his representative, rejected any suggestion of racial bias. He said he treated unusual claims cautiously regardless of race. Hill wrote that down too. Intent matters, he told Collins later. But outcome matters even when intent is disputed. By late afternoon, Collins placed Whitaker on administrative leave pending a broader review. Kyle was reassigned temporarily and ordered to complete additional training on verification procedures. Alicia received the update by telephone while leaving the Pentagon area. They suspended him? She asked. Administratively, Collins said. No final finding yet. Alicia looked out across the traffic moving toward Virginia. Good. Collins sounded surprised. Good. Because punishment before evidence is complete would repeat the same mistake in a different uniform. Collins was silent. Alicia continued. Take your time. Compare everything. If the pattern is real, prove it. If it is not, say that too. After the call ended, Collins looked through the glass wall toward Hill, who was opening another file. Dean Whitaker had spent the previous day deciding Alicia's identity before verification. Now the department faced a harder test. It had to decide his responsibility without doing the same thing. Over the next 2 weeks, the broader review became less dramatic and more precise, which was exactly what Alicia Monroe wanted. Investigator Marcus Hill and Captain Rebecca Collins stopped looking for a single shocking moment and began comparing decisions across dozens of encounters. They measured how long verification took, what language appeared in reports, whether citizens were asked unnecessary questions about military service, and how quickly officers accepted official credentials once the facts could be confirmed. The results were not identical. Some of Dean Whitaker's stops were handled properly. Some involved legitimate uncertainty, but the same imbalance kept surfacing in enough cases to matter. Black service members and contractors were more likely to be questioned about details unrelated to identity. They were more often described as evasive when they declined to discuss sensitive work. Comparable white citizens were more often described as confused, frustrated, or simply waiting for confirmation. Hill refused to turn those differences into a conclusion before the review was finished, but he could no longer call them random. Kyle Mason saw the comparison during a training session and felt something sink inside him. "I thought Dean was just thorough," he said. The instructor looked at him. "Thorough with everyone?" Kyle did not answer immediately. That was the problem. Across town, Alicia returned to her regular duties. She chaired briefings, reviewed personnel updates, and moved through secure meetings without mentioning what had happened unless someone asked directly. Major Sarah Caldwell eventually did. "Do you ever wish you had just told him who you knew?" Alicia looked at her. "No." Sarah frowned. "It would have ended faster." "For me." Alicia closed the folder in front of her. "That is not the same thing as ending correctly." Sarah understood the difference. If respect arrived only after influence was revealed, then the system had learned nothing. At the precinct, Whitaker submitted a written response through his representative. He denied racial bias and argued that military impersonation cases required skepticism because fake credentials could be convincing. Hill read the statement twice. Then he compared it with the recordings. In several cases, Whitaker had continued questioning even after official confirmation. That distinction mattered. Skepticism before verification could be caution. Skepticism after verification required another explanation. Collins called Hill into her office. "Can we support a finding?" she asked. "On inconsistent verification practices, yes. On inaccurate characterization in some reports, likely yes. On racial motive, not yet." Collins nodded. "Then we do not overstate it." Hill closed the file. "But we also do not ignore disparate treatment because motive is difficult to prove." Collins agreed. That afternoon, she approved immediate procedural changes while the disciplinary process continued. Officers would document the reason for any continued detention after military or federal credentials were confirmed. Supervisors would review cases where service members were questioned about deployment history or restricted duties unrelated to the original incident. Body camera footage would be compared with written descriptions whenever terms such as evasive, deceptive, or uncooperative were used in disputed credential cases. Kyle was assigned to ride with a different field supervisor. 3 days later, he encountered a Black Navy reservist outside a federal facility after a parking access reader malfunctioned. The man's identification was valid, but the system initially failed to return a current access status. Kyle felt the old temptation to fill uncertainty with questions. Instead, he called the proper verification contact. 6 minutes later, the access issue was confirmed as a database delay. Kyle returned the identification. "You are all set, sir." The reservist looked at him. "That is it." Kyle nodded. "That is it. No questions about rank. No test of service history. No attempt to decide whether the man looked believable." Later, Kyle wrote the report in 4 simple sentences. Collins reviewed it and said nothing for several seconds. Then she handed it back. "This is what verification is supposed to look like." That evening, Alicia received a short update from Hill. "The review is still open," he told her. "But the procedures are changing now." Alicia looked through the window toward the lights of Northern Virginia. "Good." Hill paused. "You always say that when the process gets slower." Alicia smiled faintly. "Because slow truth is still better than fast certainty." 4 months after the hotel incident, the review had become quieter, slower, and more consequential. The headlines that had briefly circulated inside government circles were gone. The surprise of a Pentagon-linked verification call had faded. What remained were records. Investigator Marcus Hill had spent weeks comparing reports, timestamps, body camera footage, supervisor notes, and verification procedures from prior encounters involving Dean Whitaker. Captain Rebecca Collins reviewed every preliminary finding twice before approving anything. Some complaints did not hold up. Some actions were supported by policy. But enough cases showed the same troubling structure that the department could no longer dismiss the concern as coincidence. Black veterans and military contractors had repeatedly been subjected to longer questioning after valid credentials were available, while similar encounters involving white service members often ended sooner once identity was confirmed. In several reports, language such as evasive, deceptive, or uncooperative appeared even when recordings showed people calmly asking why further questioning was necessary. Hill sat across from Collins one evening with the final comparison charts spread across the table. "We can sustain inconsistent verification practices," he said. "We can sustain inaccurate characterization in several reports. We can support unnecessary extensions in multiple encounters." Collins looked at the last page. "And racial bias?" Hill paused. "The disparity is documented. Motive is harder to prove." Collins nodded. "Then write exactly that." Neither of them wanted a dramatic conclusion that the evidence could not carry. Alicia Monroe would have expected nothing less. She was in a secure conference room near Washington when Major Sarah Caldwell entered with a message from Collins requesting a brief call. Alicia stepped into the hallway and listened as the captain summarized the findings. "Officer Whitaker remains off patrol," Collins said. "The disciplinary process is moving forward. Some allegations were sustained. Others were not." Alicia looked through the window toward the afternoon traffic. "And the procedural changes?" "Permanent." Collins explained that the department had adopted a formal military and federal credential verification protocol. Officers were prohibited from turning basic identity checks into improvised tests about deployment history, rank knowledge, or restricted assignments unless those details were directly relevant to the investigation. Supervisors now reviewed stops that continued after official confirmation. Alicia was quiet for a moment. "That matters more than whether he apologizes." Collins hesitated. "He is not." Alicia almost smiled. "Then we agree on something." An apology was never the point. Across the county, Kyle Mason had changed too. He had become more deliberate, less interested in appearing certain, more comfortable saying he needed to check. During one evening shift, he encountered a black woman in civilian clothes using a military access credential outside a logistics facility after a gate reader malfunctioned. The similarity struck him immediately. For half a second, he remembered the Arlington hotel. Alicia standing beside her briefcase. Whitaker calling her story unbelievable before anyone checked it. Kyle looked at the credential, then at the woman. "I am going to verify this through the proper contact. It should only take a few minutes." She nodded. "Thank you." 5 minutes later, the access office confirmed everything. Kyle handed the card back. "You are good to go, ma'am." She studied him briefly. "No questions about where I served?" Kyle shook his head. "Not relevant to why I stopped you." She gave a small nod and walked inside. That night, Kyle wrote the report without the words suspicious attitude, evasive, or defensive. He wrote only what happened. Collins reviewed it the next morning and placed it in a training file as an example of correct procedure. Meanwhile, Whitaker remained represented by counsel and continued insisting that caution, not bias, had guided his decisions. Hill included that statement in the record without ridicule. The review was not built to humiliate him. It was built to test whether his decisions matched the standards he claimed to follow. Alicia understood the difference better than anyone. She had spent her career learning that discipline was not about winning an argument. It was about being willing to let evidence change your conclusion. On a cool evening after another long briefing, Sarah asked her, "Do you think he understands yet?" Alicia closed her folder. "Maybe. Maybe not. Does that bother you?" Alicia looked toward the window. "Less than it used to." Sarah waited. Alicia continued. "Systems should not depend on one person having an awakening. They should be built so one person's assumptions cannot become everyone else's burden." Outside, traffic moved steadily toward Virginia. The investigation was nearly complete. The final decision had not been announced, but the most important reversal had already begun. The next black service member would not need a general's rank, a Pentagon call, or a powerful name before someone finally chose verification over suspicion. 6 months after the encounter outside the Arlington hotel, Captain Rebecca Collins received the final administrative review before most of the precinct had arrived for the morning shift. She read it alone, page by page, refusing to skip to the conclusion. Investigator Marcus Hill had separated every sustained finding from every allegation the evidence could not fully support. The department confirmed repeated failures to use available credential verification procedures, unnecessary extensions of several encounters, and inaccurate descriptions in reports where recorded behavior did not match words such as evasive or deceptive. The review also documented a measurable disparity in how some black service members and contractors had been questioned compared with similarly situated white citizens, while stopping short of claiming it could prove Dean Whitaker's private motive in every case. Collins respected that restraint. Accountability did not become stronger by claiming more than the record could carry. Whitaker's administrative leave ended with formal disciplinary action and his permanent removal from patrol responsibilities, followed by his separation from the department after the required process concluded. He continued to deny racial prejudice and maintained that caution had guided his choices. His statement remained in the file beside the recordings, timelines, and findings that allowed others to judge the difference between intention and consequence. Kyle Mason learned the outcome during a training session he now helped conduct for younger officers. He stood before a room of recruits and placed a sample military credential on the table. "If you are uncertain, verify," he said. "Do not invent a test. Do not ask someone to prove their career by answering questions that have nothing to do with the incident. Use the proper channel." One recruit asked what had taught him that lesson. Kyle paused. "I watched someone have the right answer and still get treated like the wrong person because we delayed checking the facts." He did not mention Alicia Monroe's rank until the end. That mattered to him now. Across Washington, Alicia was preparing for another interagency briefing when Major Sarah Caldwell entered carrying the final notice from Collins. Alicia read the findings without celebration. Sarah watched her carefully. "It is over." Alicia folded the document. "The case is over. Is there a difference?" Alicia looked toward the uniform jacket hanging nearby, the single star visible on the shoulder. "There should be." The procedures remained in effect. Supervisors continued auditing extended credential stops. Body camera reviews were compared directly with written language in disputed encounters. Officers were trained to separate a citizen's refusal to discuss irrelevant personal history from actual noncompliance. Those changes would outlast the attention surrounding Alicia's case. That was the outcome she had wanted from the beginning. A week later, Kyle responded to a report involving a Black Army reservist whose parking credential failed at a government facility because of an outdated database entry. The reservist stood beside his car holding valid identification while security staff waited. Kyle examined the card, contacted the correct verification office, and received confirmation within minutes. "Everything is valid, sir," he said as he returned the credential. The man studied him. "That's simple." Kyle nodded. "It should be." No challenge about deployment history followed. No demand to name commanders. No assumption that confidence meant deception. The man drove away without ever learning that a brigadier general had once stood in nearly the same position and been forced to wait while an officer decided whether she looked believable enough. That evening, Alicia left her briefing and paused outside beneath the lights stretching across Northern Virginia. Sarah walked beside her. "Do you think Whitaker ever understood what went wrong?" Alicia considered the question. Maybe. And if he did not? Alicia looked toward the traffic moving steadily beyond the security gate. Then the lesson still cannot depend on him. She thought about the hotel lobby, the strangers watching, the identification card held as though it were suspicious simply because the person carrying it did not fit someone's expectation. She remembered being called a fraud before anyone used the easiest available method to learn the truth. Months later, none of that had disappeared. It had become something more useful than memory. It had become procedure. Alicia adjusted the strap of her briefcase and started toward her car. The most important call had never been the one that confirmed a general was standing inside a police station. The most important change came afterward, when another black service member could present the same kind of credential and be treated fairly before anyone discovered how much authority, influence, or rank stood behind his name.